A couple of days ago, I made a video about Mannarino, and I was praising his unique style, the fact that nobody really plays like him on the ATP Tour. But I had this feeling that when he played Djokovic, he could easily get destroyed. And when I was watching the match last night, I was so worried that Mannarino was going to lose 6-0, 6-0, 6-0. Something that hasn't happened since Sergi Bruguera beat Terry Champion with that same scoreline. And what would happen to Mannarino down the road is that he would be remembered for losing to Djokovic 6-0, 6-0, 6-0. So after losing the first two sets 6-0, 6-0, and when Mannarino finally won that first game, I was as happy as the crowd was. He then ended up playing a decent set and got 3 games. But I want to tell you that when Djokovic is playing like he did last night, which is basically mistake-free tennis, playing offense, defense, serving well, volleying well, there's not much that any player can do. Of course, the top guys like Medvedev, Sinner, Alcaraz can challenge Djokovic and push him, but the rest of the tour is pretty much chanceless when Djokovic plays like this. And this brings up the question, and it's the larger topic of today's video, when players are in their prime. So let me first tell you what happens to players when they get out of their prime. There's basically 3 things that can happen to a player. The first thing is something that happens the least on tour, and that is when the game passes a player by. And what that means is a player could be playing tennis a certain way with certain tactics, with certain technique, which worked at one point and then stops working for various reasons. It could be that the rest of the tour figures that player out, or simply that the game evolved. So when a player doesn't make appropriate adjustments, their player will be out of their prime, unable to replicate past results. Another thing that can happen to a player is that the body deteriorates. Injuries, and of course when that's the case, players cannot compete at the same level anymore and they're out of their prime. And thirdly, players can lose their confidence. Something can happen, maybe a bad season or a bad match. For example, Guillermo Coria lost the French Open final. He was not the same player after that match. So confidence can be robbed and it can be very difficult to get it back. So the mental game is another reason why players get out of their prime. And the by far most common reason why players don't play like they used to is their body breaking down, followed by their mental game and then the game passing them by. And this is very common. It happens to a lot of professional players. But there have been some players who have gotten better with time. I'm going to give you 3 examples. Andre Agassi, Roger Federer, and Novak Djokovic. And I'm not going to go through each one of these players' career, but you know that Agassi played some of his best tennis in his 30s, and so did Federer. But I'm going to talk about the way Djokovic plays now compared to the way Djokovic played tennis in his 20s. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Djokovic is a better player now than he was in his 20s. So Djokovic is absolutely still in his prime. And that is simply due to Djokovic's exceptional professionalism and work ethic. So he was able to improve his volleys tremendously. The way he volleyed last year and is continuing to volley this year is a stark difference from the way he used to volley. Also, his serve has gotten a lot better. He is now one of the best servers on tour. His backhand slice has improved, his touch game has improved, he's able to hit drop shots. So when you look at Djokovic now versus before, it is clear to me that we're seeing the best possible version of Djokovic, even though he's at the age of 36. And interestingly, the guy that he played, Mannarino, is playing his best tennis of his life at the age of 35. So we basically had 2 guys that could play on the senior tour, because if you're familiar with the way the ITF senior tour works, you have to be at least 35 years old to play ITF senior tournament. So basically, we watched a senior match last night, a 36-year-old against a 35-year-old. So this sounds kind of bad, right? Because you associate the senior tour with less athleticism, a lower level of play usually compared to the real tour. But what I'm telling you here is that both Djokovic and Mannarino, despite their age, are still in their prime. They're playing the best tennis of their lives. And look, that's not something that's easy to do because the biggest enemy that we all have is Father Time. And when it comes to tennis, it is cruel what can happen to a player when the body starts to deteriorate. So we have to give a lot of credit to Djokovic and to Mannarino for their impeccable work ethic to be in the shape that they are at this late stage in their careers. And at the US Open in 2023, they actually asked Novak who would win, a 25-year-old Novak versus a Novak now. And Novak actually said that he would win now against his younger self. Because one thing that you have to realize, and that's true for all tennis players, is that with time, players generally play smarter tennis. They figure the game out simply because of the amount of matches that they have played. Often, when players are young, they're immature and they commit mistakes, and there are lessons to be learned from those mistakes. And as players age, they're less likely to commit those same mistakes again. So now Djokovic plays Fritz, who beat Tsitsipas, and Fritz played one of the best matches that I've ever seen him play. His backhand down the line was on fire, his serve was on fire. And can he beat Djokovic? If he plays on the top of his game and is serving unbelievably well, and if he's risking shots from the baseline and making them, for example, going down the line with his backhand, going down the line with his forehand, opening up the court, and Novak plays a subpar match, I think it could be tight. But if Novak is on the top of his game and Fritz just shows one little sign of weakness, I think it's going to be absolutely impossible for Fritz to win that match. And the only thing that I got right in my prediction was Sinner against Rublev in the quarters. And Rublev is playing phenomenally well. He came through a really tough, high-quality match against Mannarino last night. And Sinner right now is playing unbelievable tennis, incredible firepower. The potential semifinal match between Sinner and Djokovic is going to be of an unbelievable level. In the women's draw, Marta Kostyuk made it to the quarters. She was a top junior, and it took her a long time to break through. She is a phenomenal player, a great athlete. But her next opponent, Coco Gauff, is going to be a little bit too much for her. On the bottom part of that side of the draw, we have Krejcikova against Sabalenka, and I do think that Krejcikova is an underrated player. She was number one in the world in doubles. She won the French Open. I do think that she has the type of game to trouble Sabalenka. I'm still sticking with my pick though, and I do think that Sabalenka is going to make it through to the final.